This question is pretty what's the word I'm looking at? It's not ambiguous. But when I was trying to figure out what questions would be helpful to ask when it comes to corrective RAG,
What's
and
going
let's say like
on,
you're
everyone?
using,
Welcome back to another Granularity.ai tutorial. Last time we met up, we were talking about adaptive RAG. Today, we are going to talk about corrective RAG, which is a simpler RAG framework compared to adaptive, but pretty much follows the same concepts. I'll give a refresher of adaptive RAG and kind of get you guys up to speed on what the difference is in coding practices when it comes to adaptive and correction. Maybe not coding practices, but what you implement, I should say, when it comes to adaptive and corrective RAG. So, corrective RAG tackles the problem of unreliable retrieval results by assessing the quality of retrieved documents. It employs a retrieval evaluator, web searches, and a decompose then recompose algorithm to correct retrieval errors and enhance the accuracy of generated answers. Very, very similar to adaptive RAG, where let me move my beautiful face out of the way, where adaptive RAG focuses on dynamically selecting the optimal retrieval augmented strategy based on the complexity of the question. Again, I'll run through this beforehand to give you guys a little bit of a backstory in adaptive RAG. It introduces a classifier to predict question complexity and then adaptively chooses between no retrieval, single step retrieval, and multi-step retrieval methods. It can involve web search, it can involve vector search. It just is able to adapt to how to search for the information for the question you're presenting, whether to use web search, whether to use vector search. It all depends on the question you're asking, similar to corrective RAG. The main difference is, this is just us going back into adaptive RAG in terms of what was implemented and what isn't, is corrective RAG does not have the router command that we created, or the router cell right here that we created. It doesn't involve this telling you where each question is going to get routed to, and it being able to identify very well, like whether a question needs to be searched via web or whether a question needs to be searched or can be searched in the vector store. So we have here in the past, let me move my face out of the way, where I had a few links here. And if we were to run this to check and see if a question would be routed to vector search or the vector store or web search, we would simply then test it out here and ask it, let's just try this question. This one has one to do with machine learning, and you could see that it directed it to web search because the URLs that we have as the knowledge base have nothing to do with machine learning. But let's say, let's try one and see what it pops out with. Can AI agents be used in robotics? Let's see. Again, even though this question has to deal with AI agents, the sources that we have here may not give a or even talk about AI agents or give a comprehensive answer. So let's kind of run it and see what pops out. I'm hoping that it kind of still directs it to web search, but let's give it a try. So they both went to the vector store, surprisingly. I'm kind of surprised went to the vector store. I wonder what it would say. Can AI agents be used in robotics? Let's see. Can AI agents be used in, not that one. Can AI agents be used in
commercial operations. Let's see. Maybe it'll still go to the vector store. Oh, so it does still direct to the vector store. Okay, so clearly the knowledge base I have is pretty explanatory when it comes to robotics as well as commercial operations. But let's say we want something completely different. Um, can ML be, can machine learning be used in, let's say, operations? This will definitely direct it to web search because the question that we're asking has nothing to do with AI agents in the first place. So that just goes to show like the routing factor that we included in the adaptive RAG is not going to be in the corrective RAG. The retrieval grader will still be there. The binary retrieval grader will still be there. The generate code block will still be there. The hallucination grader will not be there. Hallucination grader meaning to tell whether a agent or not an agent, whether the model response within the RAG is hallucinating, and if so, generate a better or generate a better question to derive the answer from the model itself. So we have that's where we have this answer grader to then tell us does it fit the does it answer the user's question? If the answer is no, then it needs to be rewritten and go from there. I do believe the question rewriter is within the corrective RAG piece. Yes, blah blah blah. Let's see. I think those two, the hallucination piece and the router piece, were not involved in the corrective RAG. But once we hop into the coding tutorial, you guys will be able to see what's involved and what isn't. Again, it's a simpler version of the adaptive RAG. I thought corrective RAG was pretty cool. They're not distinctly different, but there are key things that make them different. They're more similar than different, but there are key features that make them different. For example, again, the router piece as well as the hallucination grader piece. And then same concept goes where we have to initialize everything, initialize the graph itself, add everything here, route question to web search, tells you where it's going to be routed to, checking for hallucinations, grading the generated answer versus questions, determining whether that answer needs to be reevaluated and adapting and kind of being able to decide whether the answer to that question is sufficient. The pieces that will be involved is still the vector database, the vector DB, which I think is still Chroma, the retrieval grader, the generate piece, as well, I think, as the question rewriter. But anyways, you'll see in the tutorial. If that sounds like something that you yourself are interested in, please make sure you subscribe. Please make sure you comment, leave suggestions, leave feedback, like, dislike if you want to. I just ask that if you are going to dislike, please make sure you leave feedback. That's all I ask. But make sure you hit that subscribe button. And with that, we'll hop right into that. So let's jump right into it, where we're importing packages. We have our OpenAI key, we have our Tavili key, Tavili for web search, OpenAI for LLM API access, importing getPass, import OS to set the environment variables, and let's get right to it. There was a bunch of packages that I did need to install: LangChain Community, TikToken, LangChain OpenAI, LangChain Hub, ChromaDB, so forth and so on. I'll have the GitHub link in the description of the tutorial, so make sure you check that out. I'll also have the paper for this as well. I believe there was a paper that I saw that talked about a corrective RAG too, but I'll have that in the chat itself. But like I said, not in the chat, I'm sorry, description. But like I said, OpenAI API key, Tivoli API key, um, same concept as the adaptive RAG, right? You want to establish your knowledge base for the ChromaDB. One thing with ChromaDB is that it is free. I believe there are some tiers where you can have it paid, I'm guessing for more storage, but we're only using 4 URLs. We don't need that much storage. Vector, or not Vector, ChromaDB is just fine. The free version of ChromaDB is just fine for us. But same concepts where we're establishing the vector database first, then getting into the retrieval grader. Now, the retrieval grader is again back to that binary function that we, or that class actually that we had in the past in the adaptive RAG, going back up, where I think it's after the router. Right here. Same thing, same class basically. These are the similarities that you'll see between corrective and adaptive. The retrieval grader is still there in corrective. Corrective is just a simpler RAG framework to use versus adaptive. So we're going to go ahead and run this grader real quick, answering this question. When Constantinople fell, was it a huge deal or just kind of a blip in history? This question is pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not ambiguous, but when I was trying to figure out what questions would be helpful to ask when it comes to corrective RAG, and let's say like you're using, I think we already established, I forgot in the past in the adaptive video, I believe we established where you can use corrective versus adaptive RAG in. Go check it the past video. I believe in the beginning, I kind of stated that of where the different scenarios and use cases corrective RAG and adaptive RAG can come in. But let's just say this is just for like an educational chatbot application. I forgot which one is better for educational chatbot application, but let's just say this one is. And this question I asked, I think it was Google Gemini, to formulate questions that maybe like a high school student would ask. I think in the past, I believe corrective RAG might have been recommended for like medical documentation where health records are. I think that was it. I could be wrong, but again, if you go back to the past video and you can kind of correct me if I'm incorrect. But when Constantinople fell, was it a huge deal or just kind of a blip in history? Kind of so supposedly close to high school teenager colloquialism of how they might talk. I don't know. But we want to grade whether this question is relevant to the knowledge base we have, which is mainly about Byzantine empires, Ottoman empires, I believe this one, Roman Empire. Let's just say we're creating a historical chatbot that can help with history for students, hypothetically. So this student asked this question: when Constantinople fell, was it a huge deal or just kind of a blip in history? What it should say is yes. This question that this student asked is relevant to the knowledge base that we incorporated. Then we move on to the generate piece, which again, in the adaptive RAG framework we used, I believe, same concept, where we want to see how the LLM, GPT-4o mini in this case, uses or incorporates the knowledge base, the documents that are in the knowledge base, with its response. So let's try it out here in this generation piece. And we'll see that it does incorporate certain aspects of the fall of Constantinople in historical context, at least too. The fall of Constantinople in 1453 was a significant event in history, marking the end of the Byzantine Empire and often considered the dividing line between the Middle Ages and the early modern period. It had profound cultural, political implications, including the migration of refugees to Europe, which contributed to the Renaissance. Therefore, it was not just a blimp, but a pivotal moment in history. Now, the reason why you want to incorporate knowledge bases when you are doing RAG into or incorporate knowledge bases in the RAG framework. Like, sure, LLMs are very useful. They have a lot of knowledge, but when you look at LLMs like we're using here, a GPT-4o, it's not necessarily trained on just historical data. It's not just trained on the specifics of historical data. GPT-4o may not necessarily know the exact date or the exact time or year Constantinople fell, as you can see in 1453. So we need, essentially the way I like to look at it is we need a good knowledge base in the background for RAG to make our LLM stronger in giving references, more accurate in giving references. I think accurate is a better word than stronger. Sorry, but more accurate, more precise when giving references. So let's keep going. We have the answer. Now we want to see if the question that was asked to the corrective RAG can be rewritten better. Again, the question rewriter is also incorporated into this right here under the answer grader that we had in the adaptive RAG model or RAG framework. So same concept, we're gonna use that question rewriter to formulate a better question than what we have with when Constantinople fell. Was it a huge deal or just kind of a blip in history? Let's see what it comes up with. What was the historical significance of the fall of Constantinople in 1453? So it incorporated not only kind of a better way of asking the question from our original question, but it also took the date that it knows from its knowledge base and incorporated that into our newly refined question. So I'm a firm believer in there is always, like, over time, I shouldn't say even over time, but we are going to realize that there are certain ways you can communicate with certain models, certain ways you can communicate with any type of AI application that you created, where if you ask a question in a certain way, it can definitely help in how comprehensive your AI application can be. I am planning and I'm thinking of doing a 3-part series on creating or shaping how to shape the best prompts when communicating with AI to then receive the best output. It'll be a 3-part series, basically how to kind of get the best out of prompt engineering to then make sure you get the best out of any LLM you're using. I'll save the details for a later date, but that's kind of what's been spinning in my mind and I think would be really helpful. Again, please make sure you subscribe. Please make sure you like. Please make sure you dislike if you want to. All I ask is that if you do dislike, make sure you include feedback. Make sure you include comments.
we want to make sure that we give you the best possible content we can. Um, and yeah, help you in the best way we can. If you're a student, if you're a professional, if you're a data scientist, if you're a novice, if you're a data engineer, or maybe you're not even in the technical space. Maybe you're someone who's super far from the technical space, but you're looking to dive into figuring out how AI can work for you and maybe how you can create a portfolio for yourself. So, anyways, make sure you subscribe. Let's, excuse me, something in my eye. Let's run this search part here. Cool. And now here is where we begin to kind of start initializing the graph. So graph state, and then we have the retrieve part, just like in the beginning, the generate part, the grading of documents, the transforming the query, reshaping the question for it to kind of be able to ask our knowledge base, for refining the question to make it so that it's able to get the most out of our knowledge base. Then deciding if maybe that question is not in our knowledge base, whether it needs to perform a web search or not. So here's where we initialize this as well, or run that as well. And then here's where we begin to initialize or compile it. The output will look similar to what we had in the adaptive RAG, similar to like so, where you see again, you could see the step-by-step process of how it's performing, what pieces it is currently, or what steps it's currently at, and then the output in of itself. So as you can see, check documents, blah, 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 blah. Oh, whoops. After the automatic, let's try a new question. Let's try, what was the Roman, or let's do how much territory did the, or how much land, let's try that. How much land did the Roman territory, Roman Empire conquer? How do you spell conquer? Is that how you spell it? Either way, even if maybe I spelled a word wrong, or maybe the question isn't that comprehensive, I know that in this corrective RAG, it's going to correct or rewrite, regenerate my query into a better query to get the best out of the RAG framework or out of the knowledge base that I have in the backend. So that's kind of something that makes me feel better, is no matter how ridiculous or how out of bounds my question sounds, it's going to try to help me get the best output from the application that I can. So let's try it. No website, blah, blah. At its height in AD 117, the Roman Empire covered approximately 5 million square kilometers. This vast area included much of Europe, the entire Mediterranean region, and parts of Asia. I want to make sure, I'm trying to find a question that's most relevant to the documentation here. Let's do, is the Byzantine, or how, let's do that. How was the Byzantine Empire different from the Ottoman Empire? Let's try that one and see what we get. It's still saying document not relevant. That's weird. All documents not relevant to question, transform query. Okay. Key differences, Byzantine Empire, blah, 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 blah. Let's try one more. I want to see if I can get at least one of the documents relevant. Um, what is the Byzantine Empire? Let's try this again. So document relevant. So I guess my questions originally were pretty hard to tell whether or not it was relevant to the documents at hand. Again, at least we know that while it's running through those steps within corrective RAG, it's going to formulate my original query to fit into whatever knowledge base we have. So again, if my question maybe again wasn't comprehensive enough, it's going to formulate my question to at least be close to what's in my RAG vector database. Key thing here is having a RAG framework or having an AI application that in the back end is doing work to either correct or adapt to your question and adapt to kind of what situations it might encounter where it may not have an answer to that question, and then know to just directly go to web search is helpful. Things like this can help in medical chatbots, healthcare chatbots, educational chatbots, all types of chatbots that need a knowledge base to strengthen whatever LLM they're using. So if this tutorial was something that increased your knowledge about RAG, different ways to use RAG, and different things that are out there when it comes to RAG, please make sure you subscribe. If it provided any value to you, please make sure you subscribe as well. Please make sure you like. Please make sure you dislike. I want to know how we can help you and what content you need to see to make sure your AI journey runs as smooth as possible. With that being said, bye-bye.